In the heart of ancient Ethiopia, under an ever-blue sky and on fertile land, lived King Cetus and Queen Cassiopeia. Their kingdom, blessed by the Nile River, flourished in peace and abundance. But what filled these rulers with pride was not their kingdom, but their beloved daughter, Andromeda. Andromeda, born into this noble family, grew up surrounded by love and admiration. Her childhood was marked by games in the vast palace gardens and lessons from wise tutors. But what captivated everyone was her innate kindness. Although her beauty was worthy of a princess, her warm and generous heart made her unique. Her laughter was a balm to the kingdom's inhabitants, and her compassion knew no bounds. Queen Cassiopeia loved her daughter unconditionally, and could not help but feel a slight pinch in her heart as she watched Andromeda eclipse her beauty. Cassiopeia had been the jewel of Ethiopia in her youth. Although the passage of time had not diminished her beauty, Andromeda was now the center of attention. One day, at a grand celebration in honor of the gods, the queen, prompted by a moment of vanity and nostalgia, proclaimed before her people that not even the Nereids could compare in beauty to her and her daughter. This remark, uttered without malice but with excessive pride, resounded beyond the limits of the human realm, reaching divine ears. The Nereids were beautiful and kind creatures but also very proud. When Cassiopeia boasted that her daughter Andromeda was more beautiful than they were, the nymphs were deeply offended. The queen of the Nereids, Cetus, decided to take revenge on Cassiopeia. She turned to her father, the god Poseidon, and asked him to punish the queen. The god of the sea, protector of his sea creatures and as unpredictable as the ocean, felt angry when he heard his daughter's complaint. He then decided it was time to teach mortals a lesson about the respect due to the gods. Following the vainglory of Cassiopeia, the queen of Ethiopia, in comparing her beauty to that of the Nereids, unleashed the wrath of Poseidon, god of the sea, upon the kingdom. His profound and disturbing fury manifested itself in the form of the sea monster Cetus. This fearsome and majestic creature emerged from the depths of the ocean with a ruthless mission to terrorize the coasts of Ethiopia. King Cetus, ruler of Ethiopia, watched in horror as his land and people suffered under the constant threat of Cetus. The waves churned violently each time the creature approached, and its roar echoed throughout the kingdom, symbolizing the punishment of the gods. Despair gripped Ethiopia, and the hearts of its inhabitants were filled with fear and grief. In his desperate search for a solution, Cetus turned to the Oracle of Ammon, a sacred place where the wisdom of the gods was sought. With his enigmatic and solemn voice, the oracle revealed a grim solution. The only way to calm Poseidon and save the kingdom was through a heartbreaking sacrifice. Princess Andromeda, the innocent daughter of Cetus and Cassiopeia, was to be given to Cetus. This news fell on Cetus like a heavy burden. The thought of sacrificing his beloved daughter, a pure and innocent soul, was unbearable. But faced with the alternative of seeing his kingdom fall into ruin, he was forced to make the most difficult decision of his life. Unaware of her mother's arrogant actions, Andromeda became the key to Ethiopia's salvation. Andromeda's destiny, marked by her mother's pride, led her to the coast, where she was bound to a solitary rock facing the vastness of the sea. Despite her royal lineage, she was vulnerable and caught in the machinations of fate and the gods. Andromeda, whose kindness and beauty were well known, looked out over the horizon with fear and resignation. Perhaps she was thinking of happier times or a future that could no longer be hers. With its constant waves, the sea was now her only companion, a silent witness to her tragic fate. On the coast, King Cetus and Queen Cassiopeia faced the agony of their decision. The protection of their people had forced them to make the most difficult decision: to sacrifice their daughter. This act filled them with immense pain, especially Cassiopeia, whose vanity had triggered this terrible situation. Andromeda, her white dress flashing under the jagged glints of the sun, was led by guards to an imposing, isolated rock that rose from the sea. Her hands trembled, and though she tried to remain calm, her eyes revealed her deep fear. The chains, cold and heavy, imprisoned her, leaving marks on her delicate wrists. Cassiopeia, watching from a distance, cursed herself for her arrogance. She had boasted of her daughter's beauty, which was now becoming a death sentence. Beside her, King Cetus, who had always displayed an unchanging facade, struggled to hold back tears. Although the decision to sacrifice his daughter had been made together, the burden was too heavy for him. Tension mounted as the tide rose, signaling the approach of Poseidon's sea monster. The citizens gathered on the beach felt helpless, their hearts filled with fear and sadness for the young princess, whose life was about to be sacrificed by forces beyond their comprehension. On his way back after vanquishing Medusa, Perseus furrowed the skies with his winged sandals. His cloak fluttered behind him, and in his hand, protected by sackcloth, he carried the head of Medusa, whose gaze had the power to turn to stone whoever dared to look upon it. From the sky, he caught sight of a scene that chilled his blood. The sight of a young woman tied to a rock in the middle of the sea disconcerted him. Descending for a closer look, he caught sight of a young woman of unparalleled beauty, with dark hair swaying in the wind and tears cascading down her cheeks. Perseus was immediately captivated but also sensed imminent danger. A sea monster was approaching, its jaws ready to devour the innocent. Andromeda looked up at him as he approached, her eyes reflecting hope. Perseus, resplendent in his armor, looked more like a god than a mortal. "Who are you, descending from the heavens like a divine messenger?" asked Andromeda. "I am Perseus, son of Zeus. I promise you, under heaven and sea, that I will deliver you from this fate," replied Perseus. Though frightened, Andromeda saw a sincerity that dispelled some of her fear in his eyes. The battle that followed was epic. The sea monster, a creature of indescribable terror, emerged roaring, challenging the hero. With his sword and shield, Perseus confronted the beast with agility and courage, proving his worth as a son of Zeus. The monster pounced on the shore, roaring with fury. But before Perseus could use Medusa's petrifying gaze, he had to ensure he was not trapped in its power. Remembering Athena's teachings, he closed his eyes and positioned Medusa's head toward the monster. At the battle's climax, Perseus revealed the Gorgon's fearsome head. The eyes of Medusa, though inert in death, still possessed the power to turn any being to stone. The sea monster, meeting that gaze, immediately began to slow down. Its roars turned to moans, and its mighty gait to a stagger. Its scales turned gray and stiff. What was once a fearsome creature was now a stone statue falling back into the sea with a roar, causing waves to ripple out in all directions. Quickly freeing Andromeda from her chains, Perseus held her in his arms. Still in awe of the miracle she had just witnessed, she looked up at him with gratitude and admiration. "You have saved my life, brave Perseus. How could I ever thank you?" she said, her voice still trembling but now with a tinge of warmth. "Seeing your smile and knowing you are safe is all the thanks I need," Perseus replied genuinely. Perseus brought Andromeda to her parents, who were grateful and offered their daughter a marriage. Cephus' offer was not received with joy by all. Phineus, Andromeda's uncle and her previous suitor, felt the fire of jealousy consuming him. He had remained silent while Andromeda was in danger, and now he watched as another claimed his prize. The wedding of Perseus and Andromeda was destined to be a time of grand celebration for the kingdom of Ethiopia. However, the shadow of a previous engagement threatened to overshadow the couple's happiness. Andromeda had been betrothed to Phineus, Cephus' brother, a detail forgotten in recent events' tumult. Phineus, feeling betrayed and furious at the change of plans, decided to act. He gathered a group of loyal warriors and planned an ambush during the wedding ceremony. The party, full of laughter and joy, was far from suspecting the coming conflict. As Perseus and Andromeda exchanged vows, the celebration was interrupted by the irruption of Phineus and his armed men. Surprise and confusion gripped the guests as Phineus angrily accused Perseus of stealing his rights. King Cephus tried to mediate the situation, reminding Phineus that Andromeda's sacrifice was necessary to save the kingdom and that Perseus had been her savior. However, Phineus, blinded by betrayal and resentment, rejected any attempt at dialogue. The air filled with tension, and the guests backed away, leaving Perseus and Phineus facing each other in a staring duel. Despite being outnumbered, Perseus stood his ground, protecting Andromeda, who watched in anguish from the side. Phineus' followers, armed with swords and spears, rushed at Perseus. The combat was fierce. Though a skilled warrior, Perseus fought an enemy far more fantastic in numbers. In the heat of battle, he avoided looking directly into the bag containing Medusa's head, aware of the devastating power that lay within and reluctant to use it unless necessary. As the fighting intensified, Phineus, cunning and calculated, sought an opportunity to strike a killing blow. However, aware of the danger, Perseus maintained an agile and alert defense, dodging each attack skillfully. At a critical moment, when it seemed that Perseus would be overcome, he remembered the words of Athena, who had given him the head of Medusa. He knew he must make use of this last resort. With a swift movement, Perseus pulled out Medusa's head, still inside his pouch, and raised it before his attackers. Phineus' men, upon seeing the head, instantly turned to stone, their faces captured in an eternal expression of terror and surprise. Phineus, realizing what was happening, tried to turn around, but it was too late. His eyes met Medusa's petrifying gaze, and he, too, was transformed into stone. With the threat removed, Perseus put Medusa's head away and turned to Andromeda, who ran to him, relieved and grateful. Once filled with chaos and violence, the palace resumed its celebration, albeit with a more sober tone after what had happened. Andromeda and Perseus, united by love and marriage, settled in Mycenae, where their story continued to unfold. 7 sons and a daughter were born from their union, each destined to play a significant role in Greek history. Their best-known son, Perseus, founded the city of Mycenae, making it an important center in ancient Greece. Electrician, another of his sons, ascended to the throne of Mycenae. The legendary Heracles, who would go on to live his epic adventures, was born through his offspring. However, the story of Andromeda and Perseus did not end on Earth. The gods honored them as they reached the end of their lives. They raised Andromeda to heaven, transforming her into a radiant constellation that would shine eternally alongside her beloved husband, Perseus, and his mother, Cassiopeia.